like inspiring. Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Well, buckle your seatbelts, because even if you didn't go to church today or yesterday, depending on your faith, you haven't missed a thing, because today's guest has been a regular on Chef AJ Live, and we hope to have him more often. And he's not only one of the most knowledgeable doctors in the plant-based space or in any space, but he is just so inspiring to listen to, and he's going to make you want to do better. I know that just by hearing him. His name is Stephan Esser, and today he's going to be talking about 5 strategies that will help you not become a diabetic, or maybe even reverse it when you do become one. Please welcome him to the show.
Chef AJ, thanks for the chance to join you, and I'll try to live up to those awesome, kind words. And yes, excited to be with you on a Sunday fun day. So today we're going to talk about 5 strategies for preventing diabetes. You know, diabetes is such a nasty disease. Up to 10% of the populace in America has diabetes, and millions of people don't even know it. As you and I have talked about in the past, and many of your guests perhaps also, is that, you know, if you're obese, you increase your risk of type 2 diabetes by 900%. Pretty insane. And if you're overweight, you increase that risk by 300%. So although we're not going to go into all the back, data on this, I want to encourage and remind your viewers today that that's crucial, that we bring that waistline down. And that again is why, right, kind of all the great work that Chef AJ and so many of her speakers talk about, along with all of Chef AJ's awesome books and online features and resources, et cetera. So make good use of them, we should say. So let's go right in. We'll share a screen. And Chef AJ, I would love all of the feedback and interaction with you throughout our time, so make it more fun for the viewers. So here we go, 5 strategies to live a diabetes-free life. And for those of you who are not familiar with me, yes, I'd love you to hang out with me on Facebook, Instagram, etc., and join me there when and where you can. So I like science. Coming out of Harvard and Mayo, where my training was, I like data. And so we're going to go through 5 science-based diabetes prevention strategies, not Dr. Esser's opinion, but actually 5 science-based strategies. And what we're going to look at here, we're going to base all this on an article that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine about 20 years ago. This is called, it was the Finnish Diabetes Prevention Program trial, is essentially the name for this. And it was quite an interesting program. They took around 500 people who are obese, their body mass index 31 on average, many more than that. And they randomized them to either a standard of care, like, hey, nice to meet you, Mr. So-and-so, you should lose weight because it's good for your diabetes risk, or individualized lifestyle counseling. Very similar to what I offer when I do my 4 and 12-week programs online. And so what this was they got a regular, here's what you need to eat, here's what your goals need to be, here's how to prepare the food, and on the list went. They followed them initially in this study for about 3 years. Then they extended the follow-up 8 years, 10 years, et cetera. And they found there were 5 key things that predicted if you went from this high risk into type 2 diabetes. Now, remember, everybody who's viewing, diabetes itself is a dysfunction at the insulin level, at the cellular level, where your body no longer either A, produces insulin, that's 5% of all cases, type 1 diabetes, and then we've got 95% of all cases, which is type 2. Here, you've got plenty of insulin, but your body is making the insulin unable to do its job because of a number of factors we'll talk about. Well, when they followed people out, the people who got the individualized lifestyle counseling, they reduced their risk of diabetes by around 60%. But this is a little deceptive because let's look at the actual data. They came up with these. This is the success score. Now, the white little columns are the control group, meaning standard of care, eat better, exercise, etc. The dark grayish black is the intervention group. What you'll notice in this is that the more of the little 5 goals they achieved, the lower the risk of diabetes. In fact, if you achieved 4 or 5 of these goals that we're going to talk about today, your risk of diabetes went to 0 over the next 8 to 10 years. Now, that's what we're talking about. So your viewers, well, they can make a decision. As the Clint Eastwood was, how lucky do you think you are, punk? Kind of a thing. How lucky do you feel? Is you can make one choice or two changes or three. My encouragement to you would make all five of these. Make all five of these changes in your life. If your goal is to be diabetes free long term. So let's walk through these, because if you, again, achieve all five, the risk of diabetes scientifically, based on the data, goes to zero. What are those five things? Here they are. Take a snapshot of these. These are the five right away, and then we're going to break each one down. So there they are. Now let's look at each one separately. As I talked about, if you're overweight, body mass index over 24, if you're obese, body mass index over 30, you are radically increasing your risk of type 2 diabetes. This, of course, is because the fat cells, our adipose cells, don't just sit there quietly. They release molecules called adipokines that circulate through the bloodstream and damage your body. Not only do they damage the blood vessels, increasing the risk of heart disease, they damage the joints, increasing the risk of osteoarthritis, and they increase, of course, the damage, the dysfunction at the GLUT2 and GLUT4 receptors. These are little tiny receptors that sit on your muscles and your liver and your bones and other places. And these little receptors, insulin has to bind to them. When you're carrying extra weight, what happens is the adipokines, the little molecules circulate, bind to those receptor sites and block insulin from doing its job. So now insulin can't work. And as a result, your body goes, something's wrong. We've got to make more insulin. And that's what the body does for about 10 years until it gets tired. And then it gives up. And then you get diagnosed with diabetes. Now, diabetes is not the only thing that carrying extra weight increases the risk of. You can see this whole list, this whole plethora. So if you struggle with any of these diseases or have a high family history of these and you're carrying extra weight, today's the day. Today's the day to make the change, right? Join some of Chef AJ's stuff, go online and sign up on my 4-week program that starts in May, but make changes. And I think Chef AJ will wholeheartedly agree with this statement that eating a whole food, plant-based diet focused on micronutrient dense, calorie poor foods is the most sustainable, globally healthy approach to long-term weight loss, right? So that eating the plants in their minimally processed form, loaded with micronutrition, this is the key to success. This is the key to long-term weight loss for all of us. Number 2 goal was total fat less than 30% of daily calories. Total fat less than 30% of daily calories. Now, I would argue that's not even adequate enough, but this is what one of the goals in the diabetes program was. So if you look at studies, right, the Ornish, the Esselstyn, the McDougall, the Pritikin, the Rice diet, the China study, all of these are far lower, right, in percentages of fat. And this is why people reverse, right, their chronic cardiometabolic diseases, their heart disease, their type 2 diabetes, their obesity, their liver dysfunction, all melt away in large part because of this low fat consumption. My 4-week challenge is similar to that. It's built upon that great data. It's built upon the 100+ published studies of Pritikin, right? All showing that micronutrient dense foods, low in total fat percentages, reduce the risk of these diseases. So you have to decide for you. Do you want pretty good health? Do you want to prevent diabetes? Do you want to reverse your diabetes? Do you want excellent health? What are you looking for? Because studies show us that fat, not sugar, is actually what causes type 2 diabetes in many ways, right? So the fat we wear, we spoke of with the adipokines that are released, but then the fat that we consume also binds up, right, to those receptor sites and blocks insulin from doing its job. Use this analogy. Imagine a door handle, and you take a bunch of grease, of fat, and you oil it up. And now you take your hand and you're trying to turn the handle, you're just slipping, sliding back and forth. Well, that door handle is the GLUT receptor. It is the insulin receptor on your cells. The oil is the fat that you consume, and your hand is like the insulin trying to open the lock. So remember that it's the fat that you consume that makes your insulin not work well. Then you eat the refined carbohydrates and your blood sugars spike. But it's crucial that you and I remember every study in humans shows that the more, especially complex carbohydrates, but carbohydrates in general that people eat, they actually have lower rates of type 2 diabetes, not higher. But when you consume more of the fats, they then inhibit the insulin from doing its job. So it cannot get the blood sugars down and out of the bloodstream. And as a result, there we go. Now we have spiking blood sugars. Not what we want. Number 3, we want to get saturated fats less than 10% of total calories. Again, saturated fat less than 10% of total calories. Yeah, so what are saturated fats? Well, for those science buffs online here, a saturated fat, you can see all the little binding sites on that carbon are filled with single bonds of H's. And at the very end, you can see a little O and another H and a double bond of the oxygen there versus unsaturated versus trans. Just these tiny little changes in the chemical sequencing of the cell of this molecule make huge differences in the health effects, right? So that saturated fat is very dangerous, increasing the risk of type 2 diabetes, but also increasing the risk of heart disease because saturated fats drive your liver to produce more cholesterol and we get into trouble. Now, pictorial, here you go. There are your trans fats, your saturated fat sources, and there's some unsaturated fat sources. Just the nice little picture there. For those of you who are consuming, a very overall clean plant-based program, sometimes people make the mistake of beginning to add in oils like coconut oil and palm oil into their diets. Some even thinking that coconut oil is a superfood, some sort of magic. The reality is coconut oil should only be used as a nice topical for your skin if you tend toward dry skin or the like. It should not be used as something that you are consuming in your diet. It is truly a pharmaceutical type agent, and it itself drives up your risk of bad things. Even the unsaturated fats, as Chef AJ and I love to talk about, right? The things like avocados and nuts and seeds, want to be very conscientious with these, especially if your goal is long-term sustainable weight loss and you've struggled with either food addiction or you just struggle with your weight constantly going up. So many people say, Dr. Esser, I hardly eat anything, but I'm not losing weight. And how true that is, right? As Chef AJ and I always love to talk about, you get 3 tablespoons of oil equals an entire pineapple, right? I mean, massive quantities of food. And so we really want to be careful, but especially when it comes to your diabetes risk. I couldn't help but put this slide up. This is one of my patients. This is their plasma that I took out of their bloodstream because I was doing PRP or platelet-rich plasma for them. And on the left-hand side, that really creamy, gooey looking stuff, almost looks like pus. That's the plasma of a woman after she had just eaten the quote salad that's below. I say quote because you see what that is. It's called a Cobb salad and it's from Capital Grill. And I couldn't help myself. I went online, I looked up the ingredients in it on the nutrition facts, and you can see as what I wrote there, 65% of all the calories in this quote salad were from pure fat. And then what do you see? All of the fat circulating in her bloodstream. You see this lipemia, this rich, thick solution, versus on the bottom right-hand side is a vegan's plasma who had just eaten a big salad. So it's crucial you always remember, your food is information at the cellular level. So when you're consuming that high fat, high saturated fat meal, well, what's happening? It's all just circulating through your bloodstream and it is running amok. All of the body is suffering. Next one, fiber. We want that fiber, right, to be at greater than 15 grams per 1,000 calories. That's what they looked for in their study. Well, it's actually a pretty small amount of fiber, 15 grams. In fact, in the US, sadly though, on average, people consume only 16 grams per day. Even if they're eating 2,000, 3,000, or 4,000 calories of food, many people are still getting only tiny quantities of fiber. And this, of course, is why we have an epidemic, right, of all manner of bowel-related diseases. And so many people struggle with constipation and hemorrhoids and all of this because they're not getting adequate quantities of fiber. Now, remember, fiber for your diabetes risk, of course, only plants have fiber. So if you're eating large quantities of fiber, you're probably eating large quantities of plants. And as a result, this fiber, though, it binds up many of the sugars that you're consuming. It slows the absorption of sugars, and it accelerates gut motility. So you actually absorb fewer of the total calories that you consume. Not to mention that it feeds the bacteria in your gut. So you get a healthy biome that can help reduce generalized inflammation and have positive effects on blood sugar control. Now, as I mentioned, fiber is only found in plants. Tragically, fewer than 8% of calories consumed by Americans comes from fruits and vegetables. And even the other sources, things like the cereal products, on average, this is in white flour, refined flour, in which all fiber has been removed. Gotta love America. I mean, just the capitalist mentality in which they make a product, strip all the fiber out, and then sell you back fiber because you're constipated and can't poop. It's great move on their part. But we don't have to deal with that. You and I are meant to consume large quantities of plant-based matter with a lot of fiber. So eat it in its natural form, like this. Like you look, this is fascinating to look at. Remember how we said 15 grams per 1,000 calories was the goal of the Finnish Diabetes Prevention Program trial? Here's 1,000 calories of food, and look, 40 grams of fiber, right? In just that, right? And that's just a small amount of food that you might eat in a given day. This is similar to some of the things on parts of my program. And you just look at that, you're like, yeah, that's not that much food, and yet I'm getting 40 grams of fiber. Again, because it's all the plants. It's all the plants. And that's what we want to be consuming day in and day out. Even if you go out to places like McDonald's and Chipotle and like a little Asian place, look at that. It's still getting 1,500 calories and you're getting 37 grams of fiber. You're still getting quite a bit of fiber. But also notice what I have on there. What puts you at risk, of course, is you're getting a higher quantity of fat and you're also getting a lot of salt. Let's go back a slide. Look at this. The amount of salt here was only 658. Now, it was actually because the hummus that I used in this picture and the beans had a little bit of salt in them as well. Versus here, if you look, we're getting 2,500 milligrams of salt. And the goal being less than 1,500 milligrams a day of salt would be a great goal. So 2,500, you got to be careful. Now, blood pressure climbs, increase the risk of heart disease, not to remember or not to forget that salt is an appetite stimulant. So all kinds of reasons we want to be careful with the amount of salt that we're consuming. All right. Number next, physical activity greater than 30 minutes per day. All right. So what does that look like? Well, remind you, you don't have to go to a gym necessarily to exercise. There's leisure time. So that's gym, that's running, that's organized sports, etc. Then there's lifestyle exercise. Yeah. Stuff that you can do. Right? Like I'm doing constantly around the ranch here, whether it be putting in new post holes or, weed eating and, cutting tree limbs and things of that kind. You are, if you're getting a sweat on and you're getting your heart rate up, you are getting exercise. Movement, don't forget, truly is medicine. Has so many powerful effects for your body. But when it comes to diabetes risk, remember that when you exercise, you are using up the energy of your body. That energy is blood sugar. It's funny, we always talk about blood sugar in such a pejorative sense, but blood sugars are required for your cells to function, right? For just about every cell in your body requires glucose, right? Just about every portion of you. And so you need that glucose. You want those blood sugars, but you want them at a healthy level, at a nice even place, not at extremes, highs or lows. But when you exercise, your body burns up those blood sugars and your blood sugars come down beautifully. That's why if you are diabetic and on medication, it's a fun experiment to check your blood sugar, then go out for a quick 20 or 30-minute brisk walk or other exercise form, and then recheck your blood sugars. And you'll notice the blood sugars decline beautifully, because your body is using that energy to move your muscle, your skeletal muscle, to move your bones, to move your ligaments. And remember, my friends, is that movement truly is medicine. Remember, if you exercise, you reduce your risk of depression. You reduce the risk. I just put a post up actually on that, a big meta-analysis I put out on Instagram yesterday, I think, all that showed, in fact, that exercise was one of the most powerful ways to manage or reduce depression. Gosh, depression is rampant in our society. So if you or someone you know or love is dealing with that, now's the time to get them moving or to get yourself moving, right? As effective, it turns out, as Prozac for moderate depression, if you get out there and exercise every day. So when you're exercising, you're bringing down those blood sugars, you're improving insulin sensitivity. You are supercharging your insulin so that it can work better at the GLUT2 and GLUT4 receptors. Now, there are a lot of different forms of exercise. I want to remind you of that, of all the leisure time exercise. So you can work in each of these areas and have variety throughout your week so that you're not getting bored. The cardiovascular piece, yeah, you should really shoot, just like the CD says we should, for 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity exercise. Now, if you're unsure what moderate is, sure, you can do these calculations of heart rate and your age, but a simpler way to do it that is validated in the literature is to merely see if you can talk, but you can't sing. So if you can talk, but not sing, that means that you are breathing a little bit deeply and you're getting moderate intensity benefits. Cardiovascular exercise is so powerful. So make sure you are incorporating it as part of your diabetes prevention program. Now, resistance training, love you to work those muscles. I'm looking over to the left here. I've got some dumbbells. I'm looking over to my right over here. I've got some elastic bands. You know, the reality is whether you're doing standing squats, whether you're doing wall push-ups, or whether you're pumping iron, doing some form of resistance training is crucial for all of us. Don't fall into a less than ideal place where you're like, well, I'm getting on a bike or I'm doing the elliptical or I'm walking outside, et cetera, but then not do strength training. You need that strength training, especially if you're a postmenopausal female, to keep those bones healthy, right? So the nutrition aspect will not be enough to keep your bones strong and robust. Because if you're a postmenopausal female, your estrogen levels are declining. As they decline, you're losing bone mineral density each year. And the only way to maintain it is going to be through pushing something hard, because that resistance, that impact causes a reaction at the muscle and bone level and prompts the body to then form more bone. So crucial, we're doing it. A great way to think about this, 2 to 3 days a week, all major muscle groups, 2 to 4 sets, and then at least have 2 days in between so the body can restore and recover. But you want to maintain that lean muscle mass. Joseph Pilates said, he said, physical fitness cannot be obtained by outright purchase nor wishful thinking. Let me say it again. Physical fitness cannot be obtained by outright purchase nor wishful thinking. How true for all of us. But you know what? If this has not been part of your habits, well, guess what, baby? Next week's a new week. So it's your chance to start this coming week. Flexibility and balance are valuable. Many people assume, oh, I've always been tight, so there's no way I'll never be flexible, Dr. Esser. Well, that's rather apathetic, and it's also not based in reality. So the reality is, well, yeah, you might be a little less flexible than Chef AJ is, but you still can get more flexible than you are today. But it only happens through dedication, through hard work, through, oh, dare I say the bad word, discipline. But it's true. This is what we all need to integrate more of into our lives. And then the balance, of course, very valuable stuff. So when you look at the studies, which is better for diabetic prevention or for blood sugar management, which is better, cardiovascular or resistance or both? Well, as it turns out, they both are. So whatever you're willing to do, and do not fall into this category. The people who say, well, I hurt my knee, thus blank. No. If you hurt your knee and you can't do anything with your knee, well, then do something with your other 600 plus muscles that you have. Make sure that you are using your body. You've got to demand a little bit from your body every day. If your whole day is comfortable, if your whole day is just easy, well, then you're probably not doing what you should do. So do not get sucked into that mindset of, I like to be comfortable. Because if you've ever struggled with your weight, if you've ever struggled with food addiction, you know that what got you there, that got you in this place, right, was seeking comfort, was seeking pleasure, was always just being in that same headspace again and again. It's okay. It's okay to discipline yourself. It's okay to choose this salad over the chocolate cake. It's okay to take a cold shower every once in a while, or to go do something exercise-wise that makes you a little uncomfortable. Because I promise you, the benefits, as we're talking about today, to your diabetes risk are huge. So here we are, back to our 5. Lose more than 5% of body weight. Eat fewer than 30% of total calories from fat. Eat fewer than 10% of calories from saturated fat. And eat more than 15 grams of fiber per 1,000 calories. And then get your exercise. I mean, the outline's pretty straightforward, isn't it? It's eat more plants, eat less or no animal-based and refined foods, and move. I mean, it's crazy to think that it's that simple, but yet that's what the data says. Not just the Finnish Diabetes Program Prevention Trial, which is a great study, but literally hundreds upon hundreds of studies on these risks show us that when you make radical changes in your behavior, and I say radical because let me explain something. In America today, fewer than 9% of calories come from vegetable, or pardon me, forgive me, fewer than 9% of people in America achieve the recommended amount of vegetable intake, and fewer than 12% achieve the recommended amount of fruit intake, and fewer than 23% of Americans achieve the exercise that's recommended. So it's crazy to think, but if Americans just achieved what was recommended, the risk of many of these diseases would go away. And so when Chef AJ and I recommend to you making radical changes in your nutrition, we're not just randomly making it up, right? This is science-based stuff. And I want to make sure that you understand that as you move forward with your own diabetes prevention program in your own life. So that was what I wanted to share from a scientific perspective. And now I want to open it up and come back, Chef AJ, to you. So maybe, if there are questions you and I can start talking about, or itself, if you and I just want to chat, I want to get your thoughts on all this because I always love your opinions.
Well, it does seem what you're recommending is doable if people want to do it. It doesn't seem extreme is what I mean.
Yeah. Well, what do you think? Do you like it when people, like, let's say you and I said, hey, do all, we want you to do these 5, the risk goes to 0. Do you think people are more successful if they just choose 1 or 2 or 3? Or do you think they should just go all in? And why do you think whatever you think?
Because what's the word I'm thinking of? The multifactorial. It's like, it's better to do one thing than no things, but it's lifestyle because it's not just one thing that's going to make you happy, healthy, and have a long life. It's many things. And that's what I love about lifestyle medicine. It's not just one pillar. A lot of people just think it's diet and they don't do anything for their emotional health or their sleep or their exercise. And it's better to do the food than to not do the food. But I think people get so wrapped up on just the diet,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And I feel like if your viewers, right, who are at risk do all 5 of these, right, they're making themselves bulletproof essentially for diabetes, according to the studies. And so why put yourself at risk, right? I mean, it doesn't really make sense to drink a little bit of cyanide every day. I mean, just why not drink the cyanide, right? Instead have the fresh veggies and fruits, et cetera. And also because it's so joyful when you feel well and you feel healthy. Yeah. And so when you make those 5 big changes, when you make real changes, like what Chef AJ and I recommend to people, you make big changes, all of a sudden in 2 weeks, you feel amazing. So Pritikin's programs, right, that they did literature, they did these studies in the 1960s and 70s on, right, the true Pritikin program back in the day. What they found was that within 26 days, type 2 diabetics, 80% of the time were off all blood sugar medications, and 40% of people on insulin were off it with normal numbers. So like for the people who are diabetic out there to think what you're telling me, right? If I'm a type 2 diabetic, that literally there's a 40 to 80% likelihood I will be off all these medicines in 1 month. The answer is yes, that's what the studies show. But that doesn't happen when you make tiny little changes. It has to be radical changes in your nutrition, in your movement, et cetera, or that may seem radical to some people. But what's really cool is maybe for the first time in a long time, you get to experience what it's like to be healthy. And that is the most joyous thing that there is out there. I mean, that's why I love this message so much, right? As you know, Chef AJ, I'm a 4th generation plant-based guy. And so, decade after decade, generation after generation, to see people getting healthy and feeling good. I had a lady and her husband the other day did my 4-week program with me, my virtual program. And she wrote me an email the other day. She's like, yeah, it was great. I lost 20 pounds. My husband lost 25 in the month. She's like, but what's even better is we lost our medications. They went off, the blood pressure medicine, the diabetic medicines they were on, some metformin, et cetera. And she's just like, our energy is through the roof. The way I feel is so clean. It's so different than what I used to feel like. And so to your viewers, I'd say, if you put yourselves on the shelf, if you've accepted that chronically achy joints, that chronically puckered, inflamed skin, that, smelly body odor, et cetera, if you accepted that that's all normal, I want to encourage you to actually join me to do something powerful for 4 to 8 weeks and see what can happen,
What do you think, Dr. Esser, is the reason that people don't do this?
Well, I think those great behavioral change pyramid, right? There's so many aspects to this. I used to only focus on education, right? Like, oh, it's just because they don't know the data. If they knew the data, they'd make a change. But the reality is that's only one block in the success paradigm for most of us. And so that little bit of information is great. If you're an analytic, intellectual, left brain person, that knowledge is powerful stuff. It may totally change your life. But if you're more of that artistic, creative, right person, well, knowing that it's good for you and it's going to reduce your risk of stuff, you're like, yeah, that's nice. Thanks for sharing. But, right? And so much more for us is our social settings, our circles of influence, our personal habits, our levels of joy. I mean, you talked about Sunday. Where are people finding their joy these days? Where are they finding purpose and meaning and value in life? So many people are just struggling. They're not really enjoying their jobs. They hate their marriages. They're tired of their kids, So the only place they find joy is in calorie-dense food-like substances of abuse that release massive quantities of dopamine in the brain, and boom. And they're just living. I see some of the workers at the orthopedic clinic that I work at, and they'll go in the lunchroom, and I just look at what they're eating. But then I hear them on their phones later outside or whatever, talking about how stressed they are and how they're dealing with this childcare thing or this broken marriage or this, and they don't even like their job. And I'm going, yeah, that's why they bought the Chick-fil-A. That's why they're stuffing down the Dairy Queen smoothie. It's because they're hurting here. So if any of you have struggled with food addiction, if any of you had struggled with your weight over time, I would say, hey, fly to the 30,000th view of your life and look down and say, do I really like myself? Am I really happy with who I am? Do I really have purpose and intention? Where am I finding joy? Because if you don't have answers for these things, you're not going to be successful, not long term. We've got to address those foundational things. And so information and education is one piece of the pie, but then we've got all those other aspects. Am I creating a social network of people that support me? Have I learned how to prepare food so that I'm good at it, right? I'm at least reasonable at it, right? Have I developed a relationship? Am I romancing healthy foods so I actually enjoy it? I have fun with it. Or, am I just always like, I wish I could have the pizza. I'm so sad doing the Chef AJ approach. And Dr. Esser's thing, I feel deprived. Well, that's a problem because there's deeper wounds that need to be addressed is the reality. It's funny, somebody said to me the other day, well, what, you're just going to have that fruit for lunch? I was like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm just going to have some fruit. Let's go live life, as though every meal has to be some huge, decadent explosion of like the Sultan's feast. And it's like, no, I got a lot of living to do. I'm not just like obsessing, sitting around about food all day. But food is wonderful and delightful, and I love it. And it's so tasty, right? But the reality is, if I'm doing something else, the food becomes secondary. If you know what I mean? Like the other day, I was busy working out in the yard. I was putting up some hammocks and doing a few other things, and I was a little belated to get to the dinner table. And so I said, "Whoa, it's getting too late." Quickly, just grabbed my salad, blended it up, and drank it because I didn't have a lot of time. But I still wanted the micronutrients, so that's okay. You want to prioritize your health and your vitality. But you don't necessarily need to prioritize making 6-course meals at, every meal. So, yeah, I think there's so many factors. If you had to choose one that you think is the most powerful predictor of people's success, what would it be?
I'm going to say their environment. And by their environment, I don't just mean the environment in their home, like what the foods have, but their social environment, who they spend time with.
Yeah. And who do you feel like, I mean, obviously outside of strict, plant-based vegans, who would be the ideal sort of people around them? Like what characteristics or features emotionally do you feel like are most supportive?
Well, stable, emotionally stable. Gosh, conscientious. I don't know. Are you looking like personality characteristics, like Dr. Doug Lyle talks about? Conscientious, emotionally stable. What is he? Not too extroverted. I find that the people that are very agreeable and very extroverted have a really hard time eating healthfully because they get influenced because they're always going to social events. And if there's a new flavor of a vegan Oreo, they're very open to experience. And so people that are introverted like me and Dr. Goldhammer and my husband, we don't want to go. We're not tempted because we don't want to go in the first place.
I love it. Yeah. I mean, I feel like having friends and family members in your social circle that are encouraging, that are supportive, that are understanding, that are patient, and I guess that all fits into what you were saying about emotionally stable, right? Because emotionally stable people should have those characteristics. Yeah. So yeah, I could see that. That makes sense. Because I have so many patients that I see that, that they make big changes, they see radical results, they're really excited. And then, right, the challenge that they face is they really want to share the message with their friends and family, but they struggle with that because many of the other folks aren't ready, aren't ready to hear the message. And so my encouragement to any of your viewers that find themselves in that same place is to not lose hope, to stay joy-filled, and to make sure you're sharing the message with enthusiasm and passion, but also with understanding and compassion for those individuals, kind of meeting them where they are, if you will, and accompanying them on the journey.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions that we'd love to ask you. Guys, please put the 4 question marks before, because otherwise I could miss them. Like this one that I almost missed because it didn't have 4 question marks, from Terry. I heard that taking a tablespoon of vinegar and water before a meal helps keep blood sugar level. Is this true? I had an ENT doctor on recently who's not a fan of vinegar for people that have reflux.
Right. Yeah, I don't know any studies that actually show that. And so what I'll do is I go look for literature studies that are of any significance. But I would shy away from looking for special cures, because what we want to be doing is consuming foods that themselves maintain our blood sugars at a healthy place, rather than looking to the bitter melon or the vinegar soak or this on the other as some sort of treatment for elevated sugars. Also remember that when you eat, for example, a bunch of mangoes or papayas or bananas or apples, your blood sugar inherently should go up. It's a very normal thing that it does so. But what we don't want is excessive highs and excessive prolonged highs. That's what we're wanting to avoid. But if you're eating a micronutrient dense, dynamic, comprehensive plant-based program, you don't really have to worry about that. So if you have no reflux and no GERD and no stomach irritability, and you want to take a little bit of apple cider vinegar, knock yourself out. But as far as is it the magic cure or the fix for elevated blood sugars, the answer is no. And it shouldn't be perceived as such.
Great, thank you. What do you recommend when blood sugar drops other than glucose tablets or sugar under the tongue?
It depends on the individual. If this is a person who's on no blood sugar medications and no other medications and no supplements, well, then I'd want good cortisol testing and other basic things to understand, well, why is it dropping? That's number one. If they are on medications, well, those medicines themselves may be the cause of inappropriate drops. Great example is when people do my 4-week program with me, the majority become hypoglycemic if they're on medications. And then we have to get them off the medicines quickly so that their body can go to normal physiology. And then those lows disappear. But your body inherently desires homeostasis. It desires a balanced place, a healthy place. And when you give it the tools, it should create that healthy place. So if your blood sugars are dropping precipitously, then there's something not right. And we need to figure that out. So if it's not medicines, it's not supplements, it's not toxins you're exposed to, well, then what's going on inherently in the body?
Thank you. Ginny asks, for resistance training in postmenopausal women, is body weight exercise enough, or do we need to join a gym and work out with weights?
On average, body weight resistance is not enough. And if you look at studies, we need to be doing at least 60% of our 1 rep max in order to really build good bone. What does that mean? Well, let's say you were sitting on a leg press machine at the gym and they said, well, how much could you do? You go, I don't know, put on 100 pounds. And you could do 100 pounds one time. Well, that would be considered your 1 rep maximum. Well, you need to do at least 60 pounds, 60% of it, in order to have meaningful sort of resistance on the body. So if you're just starting out, then some air squats, air lunges, meaning just your body weight, Swiss ball slides against the wall, some gentle push-ups, etc. These are all reasonable, and they are likely initially to be enough body weight for you. But after you get comfortable, confident, build more muscle, which you should, well, now doing 30 squats, 3 sets, it's not going to be enough resistance. It's just not going to create the demand your body needs. So you can, now, you start there. That's a great place to start. Get your form and your technique really good. And now 5 pounds in your arms. And you do that for a week or two, then 10 pounds in your arm, 5, and then 20 pounds, right? So you can do it at home, but you've got to be very kind of stepwise and progressive. The mistake many of us make is we get to a place, oh, I'm doing this. This is my little program. And then we stop. But if you do that, that's not going to demand more from you. Kind of like the 3rd grader. If the 3rd grader said, well, this is enough for me education-wise, and nobody pushed them, they'd never get their PhD. So you've got to continue to push the body. And let's say you've gotten in the habit of, you go to the gym, you do 10 different exercises, 2 sets, 20 reps each, and now your body got used to it. Well, after 3 or 4 months, you actually want to change up your routine. So now you may do a totally different exercise routine. It's called muscle confusion. It actually is really good for the brain and for the body. So I would recommend to people who are, if you have the time and the ability, 3 months worth of a specific program, build strength, big strength, build strength, and now change it up. So now you're doing different program.
Great, thank you. Here we have a question about fiber. Does the fiber stay the same whether greens are blended or eaten raw? I have jaw problems, so I'm blending greens with a tiny bit of blueberries and some flax seeds.
Well, the most ideal, of course, is to masticate your food with your teeth, right? So the movement of your teeth releases nutrients. Also, you have enzymes in your mouth, right, that help break down and release various molecules, especially those related to different nitrates. And so with nitric oxide production and for the reduction of heart disease, there is data to support that chewing is very valuable. In addition, when you have food in your mouth and you keep it there for a while, chewing it, you actually are causing signals down to your pancreas, your stomach, and your intestines to begin the release of different pancreatic enzymes. Not to mention you actually even have carbohydrate enzymes called amylase in your mouth, and that helps to start the breakdown process. So chewing is a very human thing. But if, and it is advisable and recommended, 20, 30 chews per bite right before you swallow. However, if time or if dentition limit your ability to chew well, then blend that baby up and drink her down, because you're still getting all of the wonderful micronutrients, right? And yes, you are still getting you're getting all the fiber, it's just broken up a little bit more, and it's going into your intestinal tract. It's not like just because you blend it, the fiber disappears. You're just breaking it up into smaller quantities. The only way you get fiber to disappear is when they process things and artificially extract out the fiber, right? Or enzymatically digest it and break it down. So yes, we'd like you to chew, but if dentition limits your ability or time or other factors, blend it up, smoothie it up, drink it, spoon it, whatever it takes, get it in. Like, for example, some of my children, right? It's fascinating to see, they'll drag their feet a bit, as many children do, with consuming large quantities of salad, just because it takes so much time, and they're smelling that nice red lentil pasta, and they really want that, and they really want the other beans and rice, whatever. And so they're apt to eat less of it. Well, simply enough, they can have half their salad chewed, and I'll take 3 times the amount of salad they would have eaten, blended it up, and spoon it in their mouths, and they still get a lot of the micronutrition and the value. So there you go.
It's funny that you say the blood, the fiber doesn't just disappear. You know, I was introduced by this idea of a salad smoothie by John Pierre, which is a smoothie of greens. It's nothing sweet in it. And at first I thought that because it didn't look very good, you know, because it was basically he made it for me with spinach, zucchini, cucumber, and tomato. So it kind of came out brown. You put a little lemon or lime juice in it, but if you drink it in a non-see-through container, it's actually quite delicious.
Yeah. Well, and you're getting added micronutrients in, right? So, I mean, I think if you're going to treat yourself to something during the day, make one of those and drink it down, right? And if you want to,
actually, I know it's good, and I kind of crave them because sometimes I have TMJ, and sometimes I don't want to be chewing, you know, a pound of salad either. But I'm just encouraging people that it's tasty, even though because people are so used to making green smoothies with a lot of sweet fruit like mangoes and bananas, or putting in nut butters or cacao nibs, and you can actually make a smoothie out of non-sweet fruits like tomato, cucumber, zucchini.
Oh, it's actually, that's very tasty. Yeah.
It really is. It's kind of like gazpacho soup in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can add in also some fresh basil or fresh cilantro. And now you've got these nice herb flavors in there. And for my children, jokingly, I call it swamp salad. So it's like, we're going to have some swamp salad tonight, kids. They're like, oh, swamp salad.
You are. I would love to be in your house. Boy, how fun! Your kids must have so much fun. This question from Jasmine is a very important question because I get people that, like, when they want to lose weight, they'll say, okay, I'm going to do your program, but I'm going to do this program first to get it off quickly, whether it's gastric bypass or keto or something like that, or doing something different like weighing and measuring. But then when I get my weight off, I'll do what you say. And I've found that if you don't do whatever you did to lose weight, you don't keep it off. But she asks, is the reversal of diabetes through keto permanent, or will it come back down the line? Or is it a case of being able to reverse diabetes, but at the risk of increasing other diseases?
Great question. So studies show the following. They show that a reduction in body weight improves insulin sensitivity. Thereby, so in other words, it makes your insulin stronger, so your insulin can bind to the receptor sites and thereby open the gates and get the blood sugars out of the bloodstream. So regardless of how you lose weight, you are decreasing the production of adipokines and you are improving the function of your insulin, thereby reducing resting blood sugars. But studies also show, for example, ketogenic and Paleolithic high protein animal-based diets, that long-term, those diets increase the risk of type 2 diabetes. In addition, long-term, they increase the risk of all-cause mortality. One of the great studies showing this was one done in Greece not too long ago in women. And they showed that women who consumed a high animal protein program over decades increased the risk of all-cause mortality of death. And so I encourage people, do not allow your short-term goals to compromise the real long-term goal. Because if you say, I want to lose weight, well, why do you want to lose weight? Is it just to look good in the jeans for the wedding that's coming up or the dress of the wedding? Well, if that's the case, you can lose weight anyway. But if you say, no, I want to lose weight so that I look good for the wedding, but that I'm also healthy long-term, well, then why compromise? Do the one approach to weight loss that both gives rapid short-term benefits and excellent long-term global health benefits is a micronutrient-dense plant-based program. That's the only approach that gives you both the short and the long game benefits. So the beauty here is you don't have to compromise. So when people do my 4-week virtual program with me, on average, men lose 20 to 40 pounds and women 15 to 25 in a month. I've got a number of people right now that are 3 months, 4 months into this with me. They're 60, 70 pounds down, right? And it's just continuing down. So the reality is you can have those rapid, weight loss achievements while still promoting excellent health long-term. Yeah. So don't sacrifice, don't settle for just short-term goals while compromising your health long-term. So studies actually show that the more meat that you consume, the more insulin dysfunction you have, and the higher your risk of type 2 diabetes. So short-term, yes, you lose weight and your blood sugars drop, but then long-term, the blood sugars climb and the risk goes up, as well as, of course, the risk of the #1 cause of death in America, which is heart disease. Yeah. So we don't want that. It does you no good, right, to drop your blood sugars short term and lose weight and then die of a heart attack 3 years later. That wasn't the goal, right? As far as I understand it, it wasn't to die. It was to thrive. So let's make sure that what you're doing with your fingers, feet, and forks are really helping you achieve that goal.
FFF. Right?
Yes.
I love it. You know, it's interesting because this question, what it reminds me of is that, you know, the people that do like the carnivore diet or the paleo diet, they're some of them are as passionate about the way they eat as we are about the way we eat, even though they are completely, you know, destroying the planet and, you know, hurting animals. But the thing I think that we have in common with some of these people is that they don't eat processed food. And if you ask me, Dr. Esser, that's where all the addiction, animal products like dairy are very addictive, but like, I wouldn't say that like, you know, a piece of, you know, I don't want people to eat fish, but I don't think that the problem is like people because they eat salmon, they don't have food addiction. I don't want them to eat it. But what I'm saying is there are benefits from taking out the processed food. And the problem I think that some of us have in the larger vegan community is that vegan processed food has just exploded in the last few years. And if you are, and I'm not speaking out against it, but if you don't eat it, it's like, well, you're not a good vegan because right. You know what I'm saying? And so it's in some ways, we almost have more in common with people not eating processed food because that's probably why they're having some success because they're taking out all the addictive foods in their diet, the sugar, the flour, the alcohol, you know, the junk food.
Right. Well, and all these, what are really new to nature molecules, right? Your body has no relationship with, it has no idea what to do with, and then you're consuming this stuff. And yeah, and it hijacks the dopamine receptors in the brain and it throws off the inflammatory cascades throughout the body. So yes, all these new to nature molecules, all these refined foods are absolutely horrific. So I agree with you. I mean, I think, you know, the reason, right, that I'm 100% plant-based, right, and largely, you know, minimally processed whole plant-based whole foods, right, kind of thing, is because number one, the data supports it. And then number two, though, we go into whole other aspects, like you said, of planetary health and of animal husbandry, et cetera. So being empathetic to animals, not killing them is a nice thing, right? And so, you know, sure, could you get away with eating a piece of chicken here, a piece of fish there, et cetera? Probably if you're an otherwise healthy, slender person. But why kill an animal if you don't have to? That just doesn't seem like a very pleasant thing to do. For if you haven't seen an animal killed, watch some of the videos. It's very disturbing. Right.
I mean, I agree with you. I don't want people eating animals at all, but I think that when the people are struggling so much, it's not because they had a piece of fish here and there. It's because I think people, especially those that we see in the vegan community, they, you know, like, well, but this program allows bread and this, you know, they don't see these foods because they're free of animal products as deleterious to their health. And like I say, my husband eats bread every day. I mean, if I ate bread, I'd be, you know, 200 pounds again. People have to know themselves.
Yes. Yes. You have to, as I say in my virtual program, you have to be the CEO of your health, right? The CEO of your personal health company. And you have to be able to step outside of your personal life and look at what your personal goals are, and then determine whether what you're doing is actually being successful. And if it's not, then we need to make changes, right? Got to be looking at kind of, are we in the black? Are we in the red? How are we doing, right? And how can we maximize that vitality? And so, yeah, that self-awareness, I think, is crucial.
Absolutely. So here's a question. Where did it go? About popcorn. Is air pop popcorn with no butter or salt added considered a healthy snack? So
well, I mean, here's the problem with air pop popcorn. Number one, I've heard you say this, it's a relatively calorie dense food, you know? And so that's a problem right there. Number two is like, it doesn't give you anything back. You know what I mean? Like it's giving you air pop popcorn. It's giving you just like fluffy whatever in your mouth with a little crunch, but you're not getting any vitamin B or vitamin C or vitamin D or folate or, you know, iron or, you know, you're not getting anything more. So I keep thinking in my own brain whenever I eat is, well, what is this giving me, right? Okay, it's giving me some calories, but is it giving me anything else beyond that? Because if I'm going to put something in my mouth, I want the most bang for my buck. I'm a CEO of this body. And so, if, you know, do I have air pop popcorn every once in a while? Sure. But it's more just like, okay, here's a handful of this because I'm sitting here watching a movie or something. I don't know. But you do want to be careful with sitting and just eating because you're doing something else, right? Because mindless eating is how many people get into trouble. And now before you know it, they've eaten all kinds of stuff. In addition, many people, if you're going to consume that air pop popcorn, well, are you going to start throwing salt on it? Are you going to start putting, honey on it? Are you going to start putting sugar in it? Are you going to start getting kettle corn? Are you going to start, and before you know it, it's right? And now you got into an addictive food place. So from my perspective, if you are eating a whole food, minimally processed, plant-based program, 100%, everything is going great in your life, you're happy and content, your weight is in a beautiful place, you're on no medications, and you want a couple of spoonfuls or, a bowl of air pop popcorn, knock yourself out. But if you're doing it and then you're sliding off down this way and putting all kinds of stuff on it, et cetera. So in other words, it may be that it is your entry food back into the addictive cycle. So you got to be careful with that air pop popcorn. I went to a movie just recently, my wife, and we walked in and she goes, "Oh, do you smell the popcorn?" Because she grew up, right, eating the standard American diet. I did not. So I have no affiliation with that smell. Versus she walks into the movie theater and it's like, "Ooh, we got to get the popcorn and we got to get the sodas." And I give her great credit. We didn't get any of that and she didn't want any of it. But she still walked in and goes, "Oh, the smell of popcorn," right? Because she'd been programmed all of her childhood with her family going. When I went to movies, my family was like, "Yep, we're not getting anything. Let's go watch the movie." So it's like there's no connection between that oily, salty popcorn and going to the movies. It's just going to the movies is by itself enough of a joy provider.
That's how they get you, is with the smell. They do the same thing at airports with Cinnabon.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. Well, this whole idea of a healthy snack versus, why I'm not a snacker and I've never been. They're like, I don't get this whole concept of snacking, because to me, why are you snacking? Did you not eat enough at your meal? Like, why are people so obsessed with snacking?
Yeah, I think that it's a habitual thing that began as they were kids, and that the children, the children perhaps ate part of the meal, but didn't really enjoy it. So then halfway through the, between the next meal, they're hungry again. So the parents like, "Oh, I know, pop these little Cheerio things out, little kid, or here's your little snacky poo in this little wrapper, right, that I can travel with, whatever it might be." So yeah, it's I agree with you, but it seems like we should be, if you're really hungry, eat a whole meal and then move on with life. But yes, if you are going to snack, I'd love your snacks to be vegetables.
Yeah, that's
right?
what I say. If you're not hungry enough to eat vegetables, you're not hungry. Everybody will eat fruit. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So you should be the sliced cucumbers and the peppers and the celery and the carrots. These are all delicious, but don't dip them in mayo. Eat them like they are, with all their wonderful fresh flavors.
I agree. The thing about popcorn is it has no water, so you don't get the satiety. Like if you eat the whole corn, it's 500 calories a pound. Popcorn's like 1,800 calories a pound.
Yeah. No, I don't see the purpose. I think if you're going to do it, make it that it's a very special occasion with, it's just you're watching this special movie with friends or whatever, and you're having some popcorn on. Okay, but again, let's not obsess about the popcorn. If the rest of the diet, the rest of the nutrition is horrible, I don't really care about your popcorn. I care about everything else you're eating, and we'll address the popcorn later. Kind of a thing.
Long time ago, I broke a tooth eating popcorn, and the crown was like $1,500. So I never went back to popcorn.
You're like, no more popcorn for me.
Never. Yeah. Okay. Susan asks, if the only med that you're prescribed is for low thyroid, why do people say thyroid probably means other things are out of balance in your body and not just your thyroid?
Well, the thyroid is a master hormone. It's the master organ, right? Right up in here is where it lives. And it is involved with everything: energy, right? Skin, hair production, cholesterol levels, bowel function, you name it. So what happens is if your thyroid is off, and if it's off enough, and if nutritional modifications, exercise, and other things are inadequate, and micronutrient adaptations are inadequate, you really need to, address that thyroid, because otherwise cholesterol levels climb, increase the risk of heart disease, energy levels drop, constipation increases, all these other problems. Now, it's interesting if you look at the studies on thyroid, of course, is if you're overweight, those adipokines, there they are again, they mess with your thyroid and they can actually make you more hypothyroid. And then in addition, of course, if you already are hypothyroid, you have a lower metabolism and that makes you gain weight. So it's a vicious cycle. So if you're carrying extra weight and you're hypothyroid, you want to be doing the plant-based approach, drop the excess weight, reduce inflammation. I've had so many ladies, and I'm sure Chef AJ has too, who are hypothyroid, overweight, and say they can't lose weight no matter what. They go on the whole food plant-based program, they drop the weight, And I had one the other day to do my 4-week virtual program. Her TSH dropped from like 4 down to like 1, and she was able to reduce some of her thyroid medications. It was beautiful, right? Because now her thyroid is able to work better and more efficiently just by bringing that excess weight and inflammation down. So yeah, the thyroid is crucial organ. Need to make sure that those numbers look good so that all the other body functions are at peak.
Great, thank you. A question from Mama's Shrimp Show, what an interesting YouTube name. What is a healthy way to gain weight while avoiding elevating blood glucose levels?
Well, I mean, I think the first question would be why do we want to gain weight? So if your BMI is less than 16 or 17, then you should probably gain some weight. I'd like to see you up a little bit higher if you're too low. But otherwise, what are the reasons for that is what I'd ask. If you are, let's say, a young female or male athlete who's doing extreme endurance sports and or working out a lot and wants to gain weight, well, then you probably don't have to worry about your blood sugars because you're exercising so hard, blood sugars should always be low. So that'd be kind of a confusing question to me. Now, if you're a geriatric with a BMI of 18 and you have a little bit of uncontrolled blood sugars, they tend to spike high. Well, then we're going to try to reach for more of the complex carbohydrates and big quantities of salad to begin with to normalize insulin function. So that must be a very specific situation. I'd need to know more to give a good answer.
Perfect. Okay. And here is a question from Bella. If you're at a healthy weight and have no health problems, should you avoid all overt fats?
All added extracted fats, yes. So all those oils, they should not be part of your food program. And if you have a personal history or family history of heart disease, or if you're over the age of 55, you probably should be very conscientious of how much of this, fats that you're consuming in the form of nuts, seeds, and avocados as well, just to kind of be conscientious. Because eating, multiple avocados per day or larger quantities of the higher saturated fat foods like cashews, peanuts, things of that kind, they still can drive cholesterol levels up, increase inflammation, and have negative effects on cardiovascular risk. But if you are a very slender, otherwise healthy, whole food, plant-based eater, and you've never struggled with your weight and you have no diabetes, having 1, 2, or 3, ounces of seeds or nuts a day is probably unlikely to compromise you long-term. But again, if you've struggled with your weight or have a history of food addiction or a significant history of heart disease, you want to be careful with those, high-fat foods.
Absolutely. Okay. Oh, here's a great question. Please feel free to promote it all you want. Deborah says, what is the 4-week program?
So something I started last year in October is a 4-week virtual program. We're about to start our next one in May. I take 50 people at a time, and I love doing these. It's a lot of fun. And what it is you get a daily email that's inspirational and encouraging from my desk. And then you get 2 live Zoom calls with me every week. We go through different topics. We go through the whole diabetes prevention, a big talk on it. We go through heart disease, obesity, emotions, cancer, autoimmune disease, label reading. You get like 10 or 15 live Zoom calls with about 15, 20 minutes of Q&A. And then we also, on occasion, have amazing people on there like Chef AJ, who comes over and shares thoughts and inspiration. And then I also provide you a food program with recipes and a full menu and shopping list and all the rest for that program. The goal is to drop weight, reduce inflammation, get off medications, and reset the palate because it's a very simple salt, oil, and sugar-free plant-based approach. It's been really cool to do because we've had such amazing success of people month after month. So if you or family members want to join, we have openings for May. I'd love you to go on and join us. It'll be a lot of fun to have you.
If you didn't give me the link to register, please send it to me and I'll put it in the show notes as soon as the show is over.
If you just go to esserhealth.com/detox.
Okay.
I will send
I actually think that is in the show notes, so I'll check it, but we want to make sure they have that information. Jordan asks, do you have any tips for people struggling eating late at night? I eat compliant food, but I've heard from others eating late is not healthy.
Well, so it's interesting you say that. So the first thing I always ask people is, why are they eating late, right? So if it's just purely because of your job and family situation, well, that's a challenge, right? If you're putting it off intentionally for some reason, I wouldn't encourage that. I encourage people to eat 2 or 3 hours prior to bedtime, because it takes time for the food to get out of the stomach, down into the intestines, and away from just the esophagus. Because if you're consuming food, it's just sitting in the stomach, then some of the acid regurgitates as you sleep at night. It harms your esophagus, your vocal cords, leads to all this reflux. That's not ideal. And of course, if your stomach and intestines have just started the digestive phase with peristalsis, which is the moving of the food down the pipes, this can alter sleep, so that you're not sleeping as soundly and as well. So ideally, no eating within 2 to 3 hours of bedtime would be the best. But again, if social pressures and family situations don't allow, we'll do the best you can, and maybe eat a very light meal at bedtime. There's a classic German approach, which is that you eat the big meal at lunch, right, and you eat a smaller meal at bedtime, so that you can sleep better, right, and be more restored in the morning. And so that's what I would say. Now, I did put a study up that was, I think, published in the New England Journal of Medicine. It's on my Instagram, Esser Health. I just put it up 2 days ago. Very interesting study. They looked at weight loss in comparison of just calorie restriction versus the same level of calories and eating it like intermittent fasting style, right? Only in a certain time period. What was fascinating is there was no difference, no statistically significant difference in weight loss. So again, the calories that were consumed is what was most predictive, not when you ate them. So as I like to say to people, there's no magic about intermittent fasting also if what you're eating when you're eating is unhealthy. That's important, right? So if you're going to go, well, I'm only going to eat for 3 hours a day, but when I eat, I'm going to eat the same Chick-fil-A, I don't really care about your intermittent fasting nonsense. That's ridiculous. Now, if you're doing intermittent fasting in the sense of, I'm going to extend the period when I'm not eating, especially if I have no true hunger, well, that's a beautiful thing and you should do it. But then you eat healthy food when you eat. But if your goals are weight loss, this recent study would seem to suggest that when you eat does not matter nearly as much as the food that you consume. That's more of a predictive factor.
Great. Oh, by the way, the link was already in the show notes, but I've added it to the chat, as well as the links if people want to follow you on Instagram or on Facebook. I follow you on Instagram. I love to look at your food.
I follow you too. Yeah.
Thank you. Jerry says, how does Dr. Esser feel about tofu and tempeh?
Well, I think they're very tasty, but the question is whether you should be eating them a lot, right? So they're very high calorie density foods. In addition, when you make them, on average, you're going to add things to them. And that's where we start getting into more of the processed stuff, right? Even if it's just you're adding a little bit of, kind of tapioca flour or almond meal, but again, you're usually adding some form of salt, whether it be soy sauce or miso or something, and and so on and so forth. So you just want to be careful with it. So I noticed that for me, when I consume excessive quantities of soy-based foods, I don't feel quite as good. And when I have one, little baked tofu, as you may see every once in a while in my recipes, once a week or once every other week, it's fine. But again, if your goals are weight loss, it's not an ideal food. If your goals are reducing food addiction, sometimes it's not an ideal food. You can make it very simply, chop in little cubes and put it on a tray and spice it up and bake it, right? But the reality is that's not normally how it's prepared. So just be conscientious, look at what your goals are, and determine if it should be part of your program. If you're wanting a little bit of soy because of the phytoestrogens and the reported reduction in the risk of breast cancer and other hormonal cancers, well, then maybe you just have some good edamame, right, without the salt, and boil them and eat them as the whole little bean. But again, just be conscientious of the caloric density, depending upon what your goals are.
Absolutely. Bella says, peanut butter is my guilty pleasure. Would defatted peanut butter be a better option?
Ooh, I don't know what they do to defat it. That's what I would be concerned about.
Sometimes they add sugar and salt, but I don't know either. I don't really understand it, but I guess
I'll have to look into the chemical processing of that. But if you're going to have peanuts, or peanut butter, I feel like if you're going to have it, I'd rather you had it in its natural form. Again, because it's not new to nature. There aren't weird chemicals. There's not a lot of added stuff. If you're going to have peanut butter, it should just be the peanuts themselves, right? So like some roasted peanuts, that's it. No salt, no honey added, nothing else. And if you're going to have the peanut butter, your goals better not be weight loss. Because if your goals are weight loss, the peanut butter has no place being in there. But if your goals are weight neutral or weight gain, well, then a small quantity of peanut butter added into your daily program may be okay. Large quantities, you just want to be conscientious. It's got the saturated fats right in it. So it can drive up your cholesterol and increase some risks of inflammation. So, again, don't use moral terms when you speak about food, though, because that just sets you up for temptation. So saying it's a guilty pleasure, no, it's not. It's just a high-fat food that gives you some dopamine. So if you want that high-fat food because you want some dopamine, well, can we get dopamine from somewhere else and then eat a food that is not as high-fat, but still is pleasurable to consume? So for example, if you're eating peanut butter as a snack in the middle of the day, well, why is that? Is it you're lonely, you're bored, you're sad? Or is it just because you're hungry? Well, if you're hungry, why not just eat a handful of dates and a bunch of apples without the peanut butter? Right? Or if you're going to have peanuts, why not have 1 ounce serving of peanuts, not the peanut butter, which, you get more calorie density there. So things to think about for sure. And again, this is where going and saying, okay, I'm the CEO of my health. What are my goals here? Where are we spending the money? Why are we buying that much copier paper? Why does that guy get a rental car all the time? Right? I mean, this is what you should be looking at, right? Okay, I'm eating the peanut butter, but why? Right? And, determine from there, can we make changes? Can we swap something into that spot that is more health promoting, brings more micronutrition, and doesn't compromise your health goals?
It's very popular in the plant-based community, and I pulled up how it's made, and I'm going to tell you. But first, I want to say that our mutual friend Alan Party Pooper Goldhammer is not a fan of peanuts in any form, because he says you can't eat. I mean, if you ever tasted raw peanuts, they don't taste good at all.
Right.
And he says you have to roast them at high temperatures. And so powdered peanut butter, which is what the defatted peanut butter is, it's like a peanut flour, I guess. It's made from pressing out most of the natural oil from roasted peanuts and then grinding the nuts into a fine powder. And the result is 85% fewer calories from fat. So there you have it.
Yeah. Well, I'd rather you had it in its natural form if you're going to have any. But again, we should ask the question, why? Right. So for example, in a child who's growing rapidly, like you've seen, I make these bars recently, and I put a spoonful of peanut butter mixed in with the oats and the raisins and all the rest. That's a great way to use some peanut butter. It adds a little bit of fat into there. It's good for these growing youth who are exercising nonstop, right? And they need more calories, right? But if you're not a little child, right, or if you're not cachectic, then the question is, well, why are we wanting to gain weight, right? Why are we needing more calories? Because on average, the high-fat foods are not consumed for their calories, they're consumed for their dopamine release, which, yes, is tied to their calorie density. But on average, we're not thinking that. We're not like, oh, I want the peanut butter because I'm getting too skinny. Sometimes, yes, but the majority of the time, no. It's, I want the peanut butter because it tastes so good, but really we're saying it feels so good. And so making sure you're getting dopamine from other places, in particular, a purpose-driven life. It's Sunday. We need to talk about that, right? What's the purpose of your life? What's your intention? What are your goals? Are you just floating? Or are you volunteering? Are you helping other people? Are you leaving the world a better place? And we all have our place in that. So that's crucial to find purpose and intention and value. Then you may not crave the peanut butter quite as much.
Right. And Eliana points out that very often the brands of powdered peanut butter have sugar and or salt. So those are things to be aware of. And I want to read a nice comment from Jordan. I like Dr. Esser. Me too. He seems so knowledgeable and explains things in a way that is easy to understand. Thank you. What you said, people need to hear this over and over. And I mentioned we want to do a special week on food addiction that I'm trying to get you booked on in August. But dopamine is tied to calorie density.
Yeah, 100%.
You don't realize that. Yeah. And that's why they want that. It's not, and people say, well, chocolate tastes better than kale. Well, maybe it does, but that's not why you like it better.
That's right. That has helped me so much, because knowing that has radically shifted my perspective. I think a lot of us perceive or think that we have a personal problem, that there's something wrong with us. I know I shouldn't want that, but I really want that. So once you actually understand that, no, there's nothing wrong with you, it's just that you're human, And as a result, as a human, you crave the more high calorie density foods because they release more dopamine in your brain. And historically, primitive man and woman, right? If you felt more dopamine, you knew you were going to survive longer. And so it's purely just about that survival tie-in. And so when I walk in and I smell the cheesy, whatever, oily blank, and I go, oh, that olive oil with the garlic walking by the Italian place smells so amazing. Well, why is that? Well, that's because my brain knows the taste of the olive oil that's very high calorie density releases the dopamine that makes me feel like I'm going to survive. So it's, that's this tie-in. And once I understood that fully, it was a game changer for me because it freed me from feeling like there was something wrong with me. I shouldn't want those foods. It's like, no, actually, you should want those foods. It's very normal. But the reality is, the challenge is creating a life in which you're filling up with other forms of dopamine, and you are channel factor in your life, so those foods are not in direct exposure to you at all times. Because
I find this so fascinating because I want people to be happy with their diet, but there's so many people that eat a raw food diet, and I don't get how they're happy with it because it's so low in calorie. They have to eat so much more food, right? That's so low in calorie density. Where are they getting their dopamine from? I guess they're using some dates and nuts and seeds in their dressings, but.
Right. Well, I think a lot of those people, I mean, that's the very extreme, this tiny little group of people, right, that either went through really great challenges, extreme wounds, great suffering, or are just extraordinarily motivated and disciplined about this specific topic. Or as the joke goes, right, it's kind of like, raw food is what people eat when they're, not cheating on the program, right? Because they're also going off and eating whatever else processed, prepared, or they're having lots of the nuts and dried fruit and seeds and oily type things, which again, by themselves, now it turns into a high fat, right? The majority of their calories are coming from a high fat source, which is not what we want.
Do you know the mechanism by which that works? That dopamine is, who discovered this? Because I always hear Dr. Goldhammer say the higher the caloric density, the more dopamine is released. But if somebody wanted to learn more about that mechanism, where would you learn about this?
Yeah, there's a whole chemical process, but so why don't I maybe when next time we get together, we can unravel a couple of those with some schematic slides, right?
For those who are fascinated by that. I'm because that, for me, hearing that from Dr. Goldhammer when I was 50 pounds heavier, when I went to True North in 2011, it's like the light bulb went off, and it's like, oh.
Yeah, no, I think what you and I should do, it to be a fun talk one time, is biochemical, unravel biochemical processes, right? And we actually walk through how does B12 fit in with the whole blah, 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 and show slides and go through each step by step. And then that, when you're talking about a couple of them, I can think about 5 or 6, it'll be fun to go through,
Because I'm so fascinated by that topic that I would love it. Thank you so much. Well, you can come back anytime, but really that sounds like a real treat.
That'd be a cool one. Yeah.
It would be. Thank you so much. And please get back to me for more dates because we love having you on.
It's always my pleasure. Thanks for everything you do and for letting me be part of it.
It is my pleasure. And guys, sign up if you need help with the 4-week program. It's really great. I sometimes get to speak in it, and he is a wonderful doctor. I know people that see him personally because he's also a real, not that he's not a real doctor when he's teaching the class, but he does other things too in the orthopedic sports medicine world. And please come back tomorrow when I have another fabulous doctor as my guest at 9 a.m. Pacific time. She's actually going to be doing a cooking demo from her new book, which is called Body on Fire. Her name is Dr. Mana Agarwal, and she's going to be making Caesar salad. When are you going to come up with a cookbook, Dr. Esser?
I know, I need to get on this.
That's right. Well, you post your food every day pretty much on Instagram. So
that's right.
Just do that. All right. Thanks so much. Take care.
Bye.